Thank you, everybody, for joining. The topic that Bill and I are going to talk about is the clinical research landscape of finance and operations perspective. I wanted to introduce Bill Elmore, who's recently joined the initiative here in all things finance in the Vice Chancellor's Office for Research. And then I will go ahead and introduce myself as well. Bill, it's all yours.
Great. Thanks, Ashwini. My background is from, took my UNC degree in finance and went the CPA route in public accounting. Started looking for the industry I'd like to get into. And about that time, my dad passed from a heart attack. So it seemed like clinical research would be a good direction for me at the time. And so I've been in the CRO world for quite a while. Certainly didn't do as well as Dr. Eshelman and Dr. Gillings with their names on two of our wonderful schools, but certainly enjoyed working in that space. Then I went over to the dark side. I was CFO of Duke Clinical Research Institute for 8 or 9 years, trying to take as much money as possible, of course. And then I did end up in the School of Medicine for a while. We'll talk about that a little bit. I've worked at other academic medical centers doing consulting work, certainly in their site area, and I've even been over to Wake Med and helped them get set up. I just saw the other day, they actually were the 10th largest emergency room attendees in the country. So it's hard to believe they're as big as UNC and Duke, but they really are. I mean, they don't do nearly the research that we do or at Duke. So other than that, Ashwini said I cannot tell any jokes. So you guys are going to have to stay awake all by yourself and hopefully ask some questions at the end.
Well, you did not heed my calling. You did give a joke or two, but that's okay. I'm Ashwini Roy Chaudhary. I'm the Director of Operations and Support here in the Vice Chancellor's Office. I've had a long journey into clinical research, all the way starting as a psychologist in India and then moving into outcomes research, and then finally into clinical trials and learning the landscape the other way around. I have not gone to any dark side. I have stayed in academia for 20 plus years and I love it. When we were given this topic to talk about finance, we thought, oh, well, we'll talk about finance and operations because they do go hand in hand. So when you get a clinical trial or clinical research, there's an operational piece of it as well as a financial piece of it, and one cannot do with the other, vice versa. The topics that we are going to cover today are, we are going to talk about finance and operations collaboration in clinical research, the areas of focus and assistance that is being provided currently in finance, budgets, rates and effort and negotiations, finance reporting, communication and transparency, recognition of pitfalls in the current process, and current work to standardize and streamline the startup process. So there's a lot to be covered, but we are hoping to go through it and then, of course, look forward to additional questions that you may have. So how do finance and operations work together? Operations is going to also, in addition to getting a study started up in the right place with the right finance or the cost for it, we are also leading the new navigators in the Navigation Hub, which is a pilot program in the Vice Chancellor's Office under the One UNC initiative to really work out, helping investigators come in and understand the complicated landscape of clinical research or clinical trials that UNC has currently. Each office is separate, unique on its own little silo, but we are trying to get people together and especially help faculty and the research teams from streamlining the process and to make it much more easier. The Navigation Hub will launch in November, and there'll be a lot of communication and training and what it all is coming out in the next few weeks.
And in finance, we're doing a similar effort. We're trying to be a resource where you're definitely not another approval process. There's not another step you need to go through. We're doing it full-time for some therapeutic areas, for some departments, and then on an as-needed, as requested basis for others. We're also, we raised our hand for problem solving and negotiating budgets into the contracts. And we are doing that as well. So thank you, ma'am. So that leads into the key areas. As I just mentioned, to do the budgets, we're both doing them for federal and for industry projects. Obviously, we need to follow the regs for NIH and other federal sources, both processes and the rates. Industry prices, very flexible. That's a question I get a lot from the different groups. Everybody's done it a little differently. There are no restrictions for industry. We could talk about the F&A rate, but the main thing is trying to get a good professional rate for our resources, the PIs, study coordinators, and any other personnel that's on there. As I list here, just a good rule of thumb is 2 or 3 times that salary level of the staff that's on the trial. So that's a good starting point when you're negotiating with the sponsors. Another key effort, the billing coverage analysis, the BCAs, we'll talk more about that as well, but this is both a compliance issue and a budget issue. The two, you can't separate them, and it's really hard to separate the BCA analysis from doing the budget correctly. Then the last thing here I mentioned, the budget negotiations is sort of our second effort. It's really sort of, it's more of an art than a science in many cases, but we've tried to go through and list some scripts for the typical questions a lot of you would get. Again, if we can help you do it, if you'd like for us to try and do it for you, we do have that, we are available for that. Thank you, ma'am. The two main factors obviously are, let's get the right rate, let's get the right amount of time. For NIH, it's very straightforward. It's the person's actual salary, it's all of our actual fringes, and then it's our 55.5% rate. And that's it. So in reality, we lose money on federal trials. If you really look at what our overhead rate is at the university. I like the way Carolina does it in that they only charge your department the 55% that you should have received. But other places like Duke, they actually charge the real overhead. And so every trial for that department loses money, 10 to 15%. And so that, I struggled with that when I was over there, but the nice thing is it sort of forces you to go after more industry work to then balance your bottom line in that department. The other part, of course, is, well, we were talking about effort. You need to make your best guess on what it's going to take to do this trial. You get pushed in a lot of directions, certainly in the industry, but that's what our PIs and our study coordinators, the expertise there. You'll get a recommendation from the sponsor in almost every case, but it's now just seems to be a starting point for the negotiation. So obviously those are the two key issues. When we talked about federal trials, as I was mentioning, the 55%, 55.5%. I've heard in some other groups, they've pointed out that this is a fairly low overhead rate compared to some academic medical centers. Duke is 61, MIT, Harvard, those guys are up in the 80s, if I remember correctly. And supposedly the NIH doesn't look at that. They look at just the direct costs when they make awards. As a taxpayer, I don't really like that. I'd like to consider the whole budget, send more to Carolina. But that's their story anyhow. As I was mentioning, so even if you do it perfectly, the university in reality is going to lose money on a federal trial. But the other reasons to do it are they don't give those to just anybody. So it demonstrates the expertise we have at UNC. It does help our medical school ranking. And quite honestly, it can help us go get industry trials. When we're in the top 10 universities, which we are from time to time, of NIH funding, if I'm pitching to an industry sponsor, I'm pointing that out, and that, hey, here's the expertise, here's the place to do your work. Back to the industry trials again, it's whatever they'll agree to. That sounds a little crazy, but in reality, they're making an economic decision on developing their drug or developing their device, and they are used to professional rates. They're used to asking a plumber to come fix something in their house. They're used to getting their car repaired. And as I'm afraid all of us know, those are pretty high hourly rates, right? So certainly our physicians, and we certainly have some key, some world-renowned physician scientists, it's pretty easy to justify 400, 500, I've seen 600. That's in that 2 to 3 times their direct salary rates. So say 10 or 15 years ago, it seemed like the industry would just put out one budget they wanted every site to go with, and that's it. Not a lot of flexibility, but they were offering fair rates and fair amounts of effort. Now it seems like everybody's done a good job of negotiating, so they've gone the other way, and they're just going to put some minimal number in there, hoping that somebody doesn't ask for anything any different. So don't be embarrassed when you start the negotiation. I used to think maybe getting a 50% increase, or maybe, gosh, 100%. I've seen 10 times. I've seen 15 times what the sponsor originally offered. And of course, I'll never know what they did with everybody else. Could we have gotten 25 times? I don't know. But that's great. As long as we get what we need, everyone should feel very comfortable with that. Other issues?
So what we wanted to talk about also are the finance key budget points. So when you look at a sponsor template, and I'm talking from a study or a research team perspective, it may not include all the costs and all the procedures that are required to do the trial. They might have left something out. So you have to read the protocol to make sure that everything that is to be done is lined up in their budget so that you're not missing anything. And then we need to prepare the BCA, the billing coverage analysis, for each trial in conjunction with the budget to stay compliant and to have proper billing to insurance and Medicare. So what is the billing coverage analysis? It's primarily to designate whether it is billable to insurance or it is not, and therefore it has to go to the study. These are guidelines that have been, that might be available, but there might be places where there are no guidelines, and then you have to rely on the physician to make the decision. But then the biggest piece is the standard of care, CMS. You don't want to be on the bad side of CMS, where you want them to get a bill for things that should be covered by the study. So that is why billing coverage analysis is a key part of developing your budget. And then UNC charges an internal overhead rate of 28%. Everyone knows that. It is an industry rate. It's 28%. 55.5% is for federal. It's a federal rate. But the actual overhead rate this is a bone of contention between me and but I'm going to say it, and that's why I think he put my name on it. The actual overhead rate for any research university such as UNC will really be in the 75 to 85% range, right? But that is why we need higher margins for industry trial effort. We need to make sure that the sponsor, the CRO, they may even have higher rates and costs than we do at UNC. There's no margin. Eventually, there's no mission. And I have to say, so just remember that. No margin, eventually no mission. One piece that I wanted to talk about in this area is that I knew that when I was working in cardiology, cardiologists are smart people. They get together for a particular trial. They individually decide. So there might be 10 cardiologists that might be in the private sector, might be who do their research, not in an academic institution, get together, they decide what they're going to charge, and they send 10 similar, identical budgets to the sponsor. Is the sponsor going to say no to one? Well, then he has to say no to 10, right? That is something academia doesn't do. Everyone is working in silos, and that might be something that we need to move towards, right?
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, let's, so this gets into some of the negotiation issues, that I mentioned before. They tend to start with really low budgets now. So don't be surprised and don't be upset that, gosh, this seems really different than what it's going to take. That's okay. Just go through with the expertise that you have, that your group has, and put your best guess together. And that's really both for NIH and for industry sponsored trials. So I had not mentioned before that we in our group were working to have a template available for everyone. As you know, I wish we could just hand out the UNC template to Pfizer and Glaxo and say, okay, this is it, buddy. You know, use it. It's sort of the other way around still, which, okay, they got a little more leverage there. And even if it's a startup group, we're going to have to go with their template. So our goal is to have a template that anyone can use, independent from us, and then get to a good starting point for, well, a good starting point for the negotiation, but a good endpoint for us to have a budget that we're comfortable with. Now, I will say we're also working with a small group to then translate our budget info into a template, whatever template the sponsor has. This is out of my area of expertise, but sounds great. Would make things a little easier. We might be able to do that in the other direction as well, to make it easy to compare and do that negotiation of what we need versus what they need. As you guys know, you always hear where we're high compared to what they'd like to pay. You never hear where we're low. Please ask. Sometimes they'll tell you. Just ask, shut up, and listen. That can be the best negotiation style that we can have. So just keep pushing that up into a point where they'll say no eventually. And then, even from a dumb finance guy like me, that is not the only reason we're in clinical research. There's plenty of other great reasons to do a project. The budget may be less than what we think is ideal, but if the leadership, if your decision maker decides, okay, this is something we really need to offer to our patients, it's an area of research that our staff are world-renowned experts in. We need to do more of this, and particularly when it's an early phase study. If we can get to the phase 2, phase 3, phase 4 studies that are going to be much larger and can probably be better for us financially, then it's a great reason to do the trial. I put down here in the third bullet, yes, we're nonprofit. I like to use the word we're tax exempt, because I have had the questions that you may have said it. You've heard others say it. Well, gosh, Bill, we're nonprofit. We can't make money. No, we can make as much money as we possibly can. We just don't have to pay taxes on it. Okay, and the reason we don't is because of our mission: research, teaching, research and medical care. So don't be nervous that, oh gosh, we're going to make too much money on this. Those words do not go together. We just don't have to pay taxes on them. When we talk about these negotiations, again, it's a little bit of an art, a little bit of a science. So we've tried to give people some scripts that you can go to. A lot of you are excellent in this area already. But when they ask about the high labor rates, this is when I pull in my plumber and my car mechanic and everybody else. I'll also ask them, so what are your salaries? And again, for the big ones, wow, they're a lot more than ours. It would cost them more to do the research with their own staff than it would to bring it to us. There's usually other reasons for them doing it, but that's not a bad one. They pay high salaries. They got to have another building. They have to have, all the infrastructure. So they're well aware of what it would cost them to do it all by themselves. The other is university charges. As you know, we have some fixed fees that Ashwini screwed up years ago and couldn't talk them out of.
Correct.
And so we've got those that are a bit burdensome. I think some of you have heard me say, I wonder what our overhead's for if we're also charging another fee, but don't get me in too much trouble there. Those may be areas that we need to charge less, and we try and make it up in other areas. But we can write letters. Some are really official looking. Some I can do at night and send to you, and it'll be in Carolina blue, but they're real. And sometimes all they need is just something written out that they can get their leadership to agree to. So we try and do that. And then the last little page of scripts that we've put out there, we've got a couple more, but just to give you examples, they want to do a line by line negotiation. Again, this is more art than science. My path has always been, hey, we'll discuss it, we'll debate it, we might negotiate it. I recommend don't agree to any line until you get all the way through. What's happened to me before is, okay, I'll give on that one. Well, okay, then it's the next one. They want you to give on that one. Okay, well, wait till you get to the end, and then you can select the ones that you might think it's fair to give and agree. And that can usually work pretty well. And then the last one here is probably the most important, and I've already mentioned it. Again, that's the finance and the budget. That's really critical, but there are plenty of other, maybe more important reasons. Okay, they are more important to do a clinical trial. So I never lose sight of that, and please don't lose sight of that when you're pulling it all together. And don't feel bad that if our budget's a little less than what we'd like, there's plenty of other great reasons to do some of these projects.
So before I move to the next slide, I'm going to talk about one example. When I was in negotiating for cardiology, there was a procedure called a right heart cath, and they had put $2,500 in the budget. And I looked at the prices, and I got the price, and it was like, could be between $8,000 and $15,000 based on, the procedure and OR time and complications and everything. And they wouldn't budge. And I said, well, we can't do it for $2,500 because I'm going to get the bill from the hospital who's going to pay it. And then we got to the bottom of it, and they said, well, the $2,500 is what they want to see in the budget, but why don't you put it in the invoiceables that would be up to $1,500? I said, that's fine. I can put it in the invoiceables for up to $1,500. Then it was like a tube light, like it just goes off. And I said, oh, I can argue about everything and put it all in the invoiceables, because then it's not there in the line item, but it's in my invoiceables. So that worked well. That was on the budget piece. Then we are not negotiators. Just remember, we are not those bargainers who can go and bargain for a price of a t-shirt on the streets of India and bring it down. You can't do that, but you are sitting with them, and they're going, as Bill said, line by line. And no, we don't want to do this. And no, we don't want to do this. And then at one point I said, it looks like you don't want to do the trial. And I said, the physician is the only physician in this entire North Carolina area. Patients come all the way. I'll just let him know that we cannot move on the budget. And I said, do you know what's going to happen? He is probably going to call his colleague who he went to residency with, who's the medical director of the company, and they're going to say, now why? Give them what they want. I said, if you want to do that, let's go ahead and do that. But I know where we stand. And she said, oh, let me get back to you. And I said, please don't do it like a checklist that you've spoken to the site and now you're reporting back saying that the site is not negotiating the budget. And then I realized, my goodness, Ashwini, if you just tell them that the PI, and you talk about the faculty member who's bringing the research in, and you say how well known he is and how he knows all these doctors know each other in that space, and they said someone is going to talk to somebody, and then they agreed on the entire budget. And I got a congratulations from the PI who said, I've never negotiated so much on the budget. And I'm like thinking, nor have I, but now I've done it again. So just to remember, we don't know what their bottom line is. You're dealing with a CRO, you're dealing with somebody who's probably been given a bottom line of saying, don't go beyond so much per patient. And that's what they're sticking to, right? And then they said, and if they argue, you say, okay, can I talk to your supervisor? Or let me please have a call with the sponsor. And that's when they will always say, okay, what do you need? Where do you want to go with that? So there are certain techniques that can also work to move things forward. So the other thing that we wanted to talk about is the final project reporting. So you've done your negotiations, you've got your budget, and now you're looking at how do we look at what we have negotiated, what our enrollment is, and how do we track what's coming in? So Encore implementation that is in progress right now has a few of the departments in it. It's a great finance reporting tool. It has a lot of work that has to be done upfront, but once everybody's in it, we'd be able to even see what people are, what the budgets are, what they've negotiated, because right now nobody knows from one department to another, what are you charging for informed consent? It could be $150 to $350, very different, right? So we don't have that. And you're negotiating, remember, with the same sponsor in 2 therapeutic areas. So it's the same sponsor, but in one place you're getting $350 for informed consent, and the other you're barely getting $150. So that is also a discrepancy that exists that we haven't worked, where we haven't come together to look at what the current sponsor as a whole is working on. But with Encore, we should be able to, look at that more on the operational side, to look at what has been budgeted, what has been approved, and what have they given, because that's another negotiating technique. You say, well, you gave it to cardiology, why aren't you giving it to this? So the study is nearly the same, etc. And what do you do if you do not use Encore? It's basically all CRMS, or you're manually tracking what's happening in terms of invoicing and collecting the payments. And that's where operational and financial information will go together. CRMS, as you know, does not track project financials. It does not track visit completions, invoicing, payments. It does not track how much money you expect to come in. So when you enroll a new patient, it's like dollars. Think of it in terms of dollars. The follow-up visits are pocket change, because that is going to end. It's going to go away until you bring new dollars in. You just think of it that way, because otherwise you're going to run out of funds, because if no new patients are enrolled, money's not going to come in, right? So just think of it in that terminology as well.
So that just leads into the issues that Ashwini is talking about. How do we get invoice out? Again, Encore is going to be able to do that for us. If you're not using Encore, you're doing something different every single department, and that's nothing wrong with that, but it's just obviously a lot more of a hassle for you. Some point we want to be able to report your revenue that you're earning, and what you've earned may be different than what you've been paid. Hopefully you've been paid more as you go through the trial than what you've earned. Okay, that's probably not the case, but having that information is critical. Are you really making money on a project? We'd like to know that as we're going through every month, certainly every quarter or every year. When I started working for Andy Johns, again, I push the envelope every now and then. I said, hey, Annie, go ahead and show me, how much clinical research we're doing right now and how much money are we making. That was almost my last discussion with him because it doesn't exist. I'd love to see it for your department. If it exists, you'd be the first or second. And so again, if it's not by department, we sure as heck can't roll it up. We know we're doing well. We know we've been awarded 1.2 billion in research that's partly clinical trials, partly other types of research, but the UNC is doing great in total. But how are we really managing those projects, and can we do even better? That's what this information, that's what we need this information for. So, and again, if it's just a dashboard summary, that would be fine. It doesn't exist yet. Encore is going to be a big help once we get everybody on.
So finance and communications. Communications is key. What's happening, how to train staff, how to work. So what we have been doing is we have in the finance spectrum, which also goes with contracting because contracting holds the budget. We are having monthly finance meetings that are being led by Bill and his team. It is not a presentation, it's a discussion. You can come in and, the new tricks and that he can have. If you want to talk about negotiations, you can do that, talking about templates. So these have been scheduled. If you aren't part of that group, just let me know, send us an email, we'll add you to that. So these are once a month on a Friday. I don't remember what Friday, but it's usually the second or, it's the fourth Friday of every month that there's a finance meeting from 12 to 1. So if you want to know and be part of it, just let me know. We also have OIC meetings for industry contracting at the same time. So that is also because it goes hand in hand, as I said before, and that I think is on the third or second Friday of every month. We do have the PI manager and coordinator forums where a lot of you participate in the manager meetings, where I think that is a good place to exchange a lot of information. If you want, please join that group. And then we also are having a PI forums where we discuss issues and concerns with PIs. They're not so much on the finance side as much as the coordinators are, because they are, or the managers are, because they're much more deeper in developing the budget and negotiating the budget, etc. So we do know that there are challenges. And when we put these challenges before in this, we knew that those would probably be some of the questions you would have. So we actually preemptively have just listed them. We know that BCAs are taking too long. We are working on it, the process of how BCAs are done. We do have a third party at Vera who's doing all the new BCAs. So we are moving on getting those done quicker. The research fee schedule is difficult to navigate. Oh, let me tell you that. That is terrible. But we also know that to the third thing, the procedure fees do not have all the components. I was just told that all the procedures that you get from the hospital do not have supplies and medication or pharmacy added to it. None. So can you imagine you're going to get, in my example, a right heart cath, which might be $8,000, but you have $2,000 of pharmacy and supply costs. It's not in my budget because I didn't know it. So what we are doing now is we're working with UNC Health and their teams to figure out what the actual cost is. We have also figured out that they might not really know. So we are actually, they are going to go back into their, what they call strata. So it's like looking at the last 10 patients who got a right heart cath to see all the components, to get an average list and say, oh, these are the components that make up what the procedure cost is that goes to insurance. So at least we know what that cost is. Congruency checks are confusing. If you listened yesterday, the Alice submission, the Ramsey submission, if you listen to the talk this morning, the interdependencies, what goes first, it's not straightforward. Adding to the fact that our systems don't talk to each other. Alice doesn't talk to Ramsey's, Ramsey's doesn't talk to Alice, Alice doesn't talk to IRB, etc. And I don't know what other systems there are. However, we are trying to work out that we can make it better for all of you. And we are doing a lot of things manually, but we would take all the help that you can give us. If you put a Ramsey's record in, send us the number. You put an IRB through, send us the number and tell them this is your Alice record. We can do that. We can manually enter it, and the congruency checks will happen. Research billing on the hospital side reviews all encounters. They review every single bill, okay? And they reach out to study teams if there is something that is confusing. It's not in the Epic billing calendar, and they have to reach out to the study teams to say whether this procedure was study related or whether it was routine and therefore billable to the insurance. If we find an error in the Epic calendar and anything has to be changed, you have to go and put a ticket into the BCA group to have them make that change. But in the meantime, you might be enrolling the next patient before the change happens. Bill and I are looking at that system right now to figure out, at least for those errors, how quickly can we accelerate that process of making the changes and putting the changes into Epic. UNC invoice issues, the UNC health invoice issues, that will be an entire session on its own. So I would not go there. We are working very diligently. We meet with the billing reviewing team every Monday morning, and every Monday morning we have another issue that comes up, or the bills that ran were detailed bills and they weren't right. And then you will probably should have, if you have anything to do with the hospital and you have any procedures, you should have received an email from me telling you that, just for your information, this is what happened. If you haven't, that means you're not on my listserv, you're not in the manager meeting where the information goes through. So please do let me know if you have procedures that you do in the hospital, because if the invoices are wrong, you cannot pay them. The invoices have to be corrected, and then you can then send it out to accounts payable to be paid. That being said, this was the pitfalls or the challenges that we decided that were there, but we still wanted to open it up for questions. Yes. Oh.
Yeah, so I was excited to hear that about the nonprofit and just non-tax exempt, which kind of leads me to my big question here, which is that UNC policy currently states that if we generate more than 25% of the budget as revenue, we have to pay that difference as equity back to the university. And so I think there's been a little bit of a disincentive for gaming in the system by different faculty to try to spend down those clinical trial budgets because they want to keep the money, which is a whole other issue in and of itself. Where faculty seem to think that it's theirs. Has there been any discussion about that? Because I think that's also trending to make negotiations more difficult, because we're trying to keep our budgets within some realm of reality to meet that expectation policy.
Educate me on that one. I'm not familiar with that. Is that within a department?
That's a UNC.
It's a UNC rule.
But for what entity? Not for the whole universe.
So
All of clinical trials? Okay, that's not a problem then.
If we generate more than 25%.
But again, on just a trial or for your department? See what I'm after?
Yeah.
Okay, a trial. I got it.
Yeah.
I was not aware of that. So that, I'm sorry?
You just have to get approval from the sponsor.
Approval.
And then you can put.
But
the UNC policy.
Up to 25%.
Okay.
If you have more than that, then there is no justification.
For a trial, more than, and it's in 25%,
Right, so that's what ends up happening.
25% more than what? Than the original budget? Okay, well, that's nuts.
If you budget $100,000.
Turn that camera off.
And we
I mean,
say-
my example would be, if you're telling me that you enrolled more patients and so your original budget, you went way over because you did more work. I mean, come on. I can get Hubert to help me with this one. Okay, but
I would
thank
love
you.
that.
I
think that
wasn't
sounds
aware.
great.
Well, it doesn't make any sense. Even if you made more than just in profit on the same trial, it wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But if you're telling me the original budget and then you did more work, you did 50% more work, and so obviously your revenue went way up.
I mean, some of it.
I can
think
handle that one.
It's more work, I think also in the budget, like in the negotiation process, right, like you talked
Yeah.
about 25 times or 10 times, right? We may build that in, and then when the work's actually happening, we're coming in under budget because, you know, our coordinators are really effective and really efficient, right? So we're saving money.
Whoa, you lost me there.
Totally lost.
If you're talking about it,
Is this investigator led and industry sponsored?
if you're talking about an industry project and we did less work, unless they're paying us.
I'm saying less work, but I think.
No, I got you. You're more efficient.
At the end of the trial, you have this chunk of money that wasn't spent down. Either they didn't appropriately apply it to Pepper back here.
We
because
can
it
go
came some-
around.
Yeah.
There's multiple reasons why you end up with that.
And it's to say that you just have to have a justification
Right.
for balances that are over. So it's not saying no automatically, but you just have to explain why.
Can I ask
So it
one
needs-
question? It's
Sure.
how do you determine what your clinical trial budget is? You're doing it on a per patient budget based on enrollment. So your enrollment could be 0, or your enrollment could be for 3 patients and you enroll 6, so you're more. What budget are they going against?
What you actually received.
So what you have received.
Okay.
So maybe the justification there is, how did you receive more? I mean, like if you, and then you say you enroll more patients and you put that as a justification, and that could be, that's why you have more, because another site was not enrolling, right? If that's the case. But
So, absolutely.
exactly,
You'll still have that PI time.
exactly,
so-
exactly.
Well, I think it's proportional.
Delay and, yeah.
It's a delay in payment, and then the PI could be having, you know how it is, right? You have a coordinator that's on 3 different trials, so you're spending the money down here, then you're spending the money down here, then the PI is has an NIH and he's 100% covered, and you're saying, oh my goodness, now who do I pay? So that's definitely something we should talk to OSP about as a whole.
Yeah, if a specific situation, please get us involved. If I can't win that one, I'll go back over to Duke.
No, you won't.
There's one of those.
Yes, I will, because I won't be, Yeah.
As far as you know, and thank you for sharing this question.
It's been for like almost 4 or 5 years now.
oh,
I'm always looking for little amendments of genius that come down from the state. It's what happens, you get ready to close your account. So again, we all know that the end date is arbitrary, right?
Very arbitrary.
So that's what happens. You may have over projected your end date, so then you have time to spend it, or you might have been short. So
Or
this
you're
is
waiting
my
on the whole
experience,
event
right?
to come in from your clinical
Right,
trials,
yeah.
all of a
There you
sudden
go.
it bumps it up.
Yeah, so then, you were paying coordinators on other trials back here while they were enrolling because you haven't got paid yet. And then all of a sudden that money starts coming in, and the money at the end, when your account is gonna be enough,
Yeah.
then all of a sudden you have $100,000 because it wasn't. So sometimes they'll go back and take some effort back here, and but they can only do that back to. Whatever.
okay, you got into a bunch of different issues. Because again, cash,
Happens, you have this chunk of cash.
yeah,
And then you gotta go to your sponsor and ask if you can keep it, they always say yes, well, I've always said yes. And then they roll it into residual. I mean, is that what you
Thanks.
guys experience?
Well, first, 5 minutes. Okay, we got 5 minutes left. This is a great question.
So please,
No, it's an
please,
important one. Really important, absolutely.
I'll tell you that there is a
Big
finance
topic.
meeting in October. We'll make that a topic so we can talk about that.
And one of the online questions
Yeah.
is, can you attend those meetings virtually?
Yes.
The finance meetings, they're all virtual.
Okay.
You just need to email us. Yes.
Oh, I
I
see.
have a screening opportunity question for future. I don't even know, and there may be others like me, how you estimate when a project's going to end. I have no idea, and when I'm asked to say, well, this is gonna go from here to here? I guess, because I don't know.
Sure.
Nobody knows.
I can get in trouble for that end before it's good.
So you
do I
can
do
add,
about it?
so you can add 5 years. I used to just put 5 years.
Okay.
It could be, they said you are going to enroll in 2 years. Well, you know how how industry trials are. They go extend, they open enrollment, it goes, whatever.
So I'll do
And
it from
then
now, but,
I-
the one
right.
now, I could get in trouble.
No, so the ones that you have, and if you can go back to OSP and ask for an extension, some of that comes to me to say, this project wants an extension, can you approve it? And I say, yes, they are enrolling more, or they are, you know, like it's going. So please don't think that your project date is hard and fast. OSP will work with you. We never know. Federal grants are much easier. There's a no-cost extension. It's very standard. Clinical trials are all over the place, so you can't really figure out. So the first rule of the thumb is, when you put your CTA in, just say this project is going on for 4 or 5 years. Just overestimate a little bit, and then you have a buffer. And if it closes early, it closes early. But if it is extended, you can do that.
So that was my original handwritten question from before, just head this panic attack off of the past. You know, we went into Encore as soon as we could.
Yep.
And I just saw one of your bullets, makes me wanna ask, are my IDS fees not necessarily represented in my DCA?
Your IDS
Am I at
fees,
risk of having my department sign a contract that doesn't have IDS fees included?
the IDS fees are never in a contract nor in the BCA. The IDS fees are separate because it is like, just think of it as a vendor who is keeping the IP and sending it to you. What the IDS fees does is, you will have in your budget a line item for IDS startup fees, and then the monthly fee, and you have to calculate that for the duration of the project. Do not calculate it, or you can say it's $240 per month for the duration of the project. They are going to invoice you, and you're going to invoice the sponsor.
Why am I scared all of a sudden? And I'll talk to you about it later.
Yeah.
That the person I'm working with, because you know I'm getting a lot of support, that's not actually in our DCA, because it's like this.
It's not in the
No, I
BCA.
get that. So am I about to have a project where, but I did not negotiate IDS fees with that?
You do not negotiate IDS fees, and
What
and
if
we
it's
can
not
go
in
take this
there? I'll
offline.
be like, I'll
Yeah.
say, here's this invoice from IDS.
No.
They're like, "Well, we didn't, you know."
IDS fees are outside, and we can talk about it separately, definitely.
Is it in, Eliza, is it industry or NIH?
It's always industry when it's,
Okay.
even when it's NIH, it's still industry.
All right, we
Okay.
will definitely get with you, because we can fix that.
Extension request form, it's just a form, so just make sure that you go through your industry sponsored trials and do that extension while it's still open.
Yes,
The
ma'am.
problem is letting it close and then trying to go back, so I'll email that to you, it's no big deal.
Very much.
Any other questions?
I'm only saying because I hate to sit.
That's okay.
So, and at one point, they were saying for clinical trials, they were gonna remove that end date. Was gonna remove the end date when we submit, is that? still
So
happening?
that's something that we have been trying to say. It's very, it might
Yeah,
not,
it's-
you might not
it's
have that
just silly.
problem. Yeah.
That's.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to have an end date for a clinical trial.
If you read your contract,
I was just gonna
it
say,
doesn't say that.
I think the problem has always been, some clinical trials do put an end date in their contracts, which then.
They
makes
do.
it difficult to remove it, and
Sure,
if the
with the
contract
sponsor.
Says like until completion, then there's a
Exactly.
lot more flexibility.
Correct, but you have to also remember, we always say in the contract that your last payment it will be 120 to 180 days after the close of the study, because you're waiting for the hospital bills to come in, then you have to keep that project open to be able to pay. You don't want to be like stuck. So there are ways, but I think definitely this is a good question to put. There is an OSP monthly meeting. We should address that at that for project IDs and project duration, we should address it at that meeting, not at the finance meeting.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Yep. And if there are any questions that you didn't get answered, there is an online submission form. And please remember to fill out your post-session survey. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you at the next session.
I don't know if I'm like other-
Oh, you're very welcome.
So,
Good job, Bill.
you know, I mean,
That's a
just to drive me nuts. Yeah, hey, Robert, Bill.
Slide it all over when you were.
He came, I recommended him when he came.
Okay, so I came from the service center on the
Where
school
are-
medicine side. of the school.
Yeah,
On and, like,
I was there about 8 or 9 years and then, I didn't even get to blast Duke about this. They had that double billing BCA kind of problem. I went over to school of medicine to try and help them with that and Michael